I'm Olivia Matthews, 29, creative director at a prestigious advertising agency. My life seemed perfect when Ryan Collins proposed. After years of competing with my younger sister Amber, I finally had something uniquely mine. Then came that unthinkable family dinner where my parents and sister conspired to steal my wedding venue and date. Amber stared coldly and said, "You can cry later. This day belongs to me." None of them knew the devastating truth about Ryan that would change everything. If you've ever had your trust broken by family, take a moment to subscribe. Trust me, what happened next will make you question everything about family loyalty. Growing up with Amber was like living in a constant competition I never signed up for. 2 years her senior, I always tried to be the supportive big sister, but our parents created an environment where Amber's needs always seemed to outshine mine. My achievements at school were met with polite acknowledgement, while Amber's average performance earned elaborate celebrations. It wasn't that they didn't love me, they just loved her more visibly, more enthusiastically. By the time I reached adulthood, I had built a life separate from their subtle favoritism. I threw myself into my education and career, eventually landing my dream job as a creative director at Pinnacle Advertising in Chicago. My work became my identity, my colleagues, my chosen family. I excelled at crafting narratives that resonated with people, never realizing my own family narrative was so fractured. I met Ryan Collins during the National Advertising Conference in New York. Tall, with piercing blue eyes and an easy confidence, he approached me after my presentation on emotional storytelling in digital campaigns. "Your understanding of human connection is remarkable," he said, handing me his business card. "I'd love to discuss a potential collaboration." Ryan was different from any man I'd dated before. As the CEO of a financial consulting firm, he exuded ambition and intelligence. Our first date stretched from coffee into dinner as we discovered shared passions for architectural photography, obscure foreign films, and kayaking. Within weeks, we were inseparable. Ryan's intensity drew me in. He focused on me completely when we were together, making me feel truly seen for perhaps the first time in my life. "You're extraordinary, Olivia," he would say, tucking my hair behind my ear. "Most people don't recognize what they have in front of them." 6 months into our relationship, I realized I still knew surprisingly little about Ryan's past. He deflected personal questions with practiced ease, changing subjects or answering vaguely. When I asked about his family, he mentioned they were no longer in contact, without elaboration. His social media presence was minimal, and his friends were mostly business associates I rarely met twice. "My work requires discretion," he explained, when I questioned the mystery. "I've consulted for high-profile clients who value privacy." This seemed reasonable given his field, and his reluctance to share only made the information he did reveal feel more intimate, more special. When I introduced Ryan to my parents and Amber at Thanksgiving, my mother's approval was immediate and effusive. "He's so accomplished, Olivia, and handsome too," she gushed while Ryan charmed them with stories of business successes. Amber watched him with undisguised interest, asking pointed questions about his income and lifestyle that made me cringe. "Your sister seems very curious about my finances," Ryan remarked afterward, his tone light but expression guarded. "That's just Amber," I sighed. "She's always been focused on status." Ryan proposed 8 months into our relationship during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. The sunset proposal on a private beach was something from a romance movie, complete with photographer he'd hired to capture the moment. The ring was stunning, a 3-carat emerald-cut diamond that caught the light with every movement of my hand. "I never thought I'd meet someone who understands me like you do," he said as he slipped it onto my finger. "You're my future, Olivia." When I called my parents with the news, my mother's first question was whether Amber had heard yet. "She's been so down lately about her relationship troubles with Jason," Mom said. "Maybe hold off posting on social media until I can tell her personally? You know how sensitive she can be." Despite this familiar pattern, I was too happy to let it affect me. Ryan and I began planning our wedding immediately, securing the Lakeside Gardens venue after discovering they'd had a cancellation for June 15th the following year. It was perfect, an elegant glass structure overlooking the water, with gardens blooming with early summer flowers. It's meant to be, I told Ryan. That date opened up the day after we got engaged. As wedding plans progressed, I noticed Ryan becoming increasingly tense whenever my family was involved. He'd check his phone frequently during our monthly dinners with my parents, and twice made excuses to leave early. When I suggested having his business partner James as a groomsman, Ryan refused without explanation. "There are some complicated dynamics there," was all he would say. "Let's keep this day about us." In retrospect, I should have questioned these red flags, but I was distracted by my growing wedding binder, color swatches, and the persistent need to manage my mother's attempts to involve Amber in every decision. "Shouldn't your sister help choose the bridesmaids' dresses?" Mom suggested. "She has such a good eye for fashion." "Amber isn't even a bridesmaid, Mom," I reminded her. "I've asked my college roommates and work friends." This revelation led to a week of text messages about how excluded Amber felt, culminating in my reluctant invitation for her to join the bridal party. Ryan observed these interactions with a calculating look I didn't fully understand at the time. "Your family has interesting patterns," he noted after one particularly frustrating call with my mother. "They seem determined to make Amber central to your life events." "It's always been this way," I admitted. "Sometimes I think they had me just to practice for their real daughter." Ryan pulled me into his arms, kissing the top of my head. "Then they're fools who don't see the treasure they have," he whispered. "But I do." Those words became my anchor as wedding preparations continued and family tensions mounted. What I couldn't know then was that Ryan had plans of his own. Plans that would ultimately expose truths about my family and himself that none of us were prepared to face. 6 months before our wedding date, subtle shifts in dynamics began appearing like hairline cracks in fine china. At first, they were so small I doubted my own perceptions, but they steadily expanded into undeniable fractures. Amber started calling me almost daily to discuss wedding details, an unprecedented level of interest from someone who had previously shown little enthusiasm for my happiness. Her questions centered around vendors, costs, and especially Ryan's contributions to the event. "So he's covering the bar and band completely?" she asked during one call. "That must be what, $20,000? His business must be doing very well." "We're both contributing," I replied, uncomfortable with her focus on finances. "Why the sudden interest?" "Just happy for my big sister," she said with a lightness that felt performative. "Can you send me your Pinterest board again? I want to see all your ideas." A week after this conversation, Amber called in tears to announce her breakup with Jason, her boyfriend of 3 years. They had been discussing marriage themselves, making the timing particularly difficult for her. "I just feel so alone now," she sobbed over the phone. "Everyone's moving forward except me." Compassion pushed me to invite her for a weekend stay at my apartment, where Ryan and I attempted to cheer her up with movies and takeout. Rather than wallow in heartbreak, Amber seemed unusually composed, asking Ryan detailed questions about his background and business ventures. Ryan answered smoothly, but later commented on her intensity. "Your sister seems very interested in my work," he observed after she went to bed. "Almost like she's conducting an interview." Just 3 weeks after her devastating breakup, Amber introduced a new boyfriend at our parents' anniversary dinner. Michael Patterson was polished and articulate, with an uncanny knowledge of investment strategies that mirrored Ryan's expertise. Even more striking were his stated hobbies: architectural photography and foreign cinema, the very interests Ryan had mentioned during our earliest dates. "How did you two meet?" I asked, noticing Ryan's stiffened posture beside me. "At a coffee shop downtown," Amber said, touching Michael's arm possessively. "It was instant connection. Sometimes you just know, right?" Throughout dinner, Michael directed questions toward Ryan about specific financial regulations and market projections. Ryan answered with professional courtesy, but grew increasingly withdrawn. When Amber mentioned they'd already discussed moving in together, my mother clasped her hands in delight. "This is wonderful. When you know," she exclaimed, never having expressed such immediate approval of any of my relationships. Later that night, I noticed my parents and Amber huddled in conversation on the patio, their voices lowered whenever Ryan or I approached. When I questioned what they were discussing so secretively, my mother quickly changed the subject. "Just catching up, sweetheart. How are those wedding plans coming? You know, flexibility is important with these big events. Sometimes things need to change for everyone's benefit." The comment seemed odd, but I dismissed it as my mother's typical vague wisdom. Ryan, however, was unusually quiet during our drive home. "Your sister's new boyfriend seems familiar with my industry," he finally said. "Has she mentioned how long they've actually known each other?" Before I could respond, his phone buzzed with a text that made him frown. "Sorry, work emergency," he muttered, pulling over to type a lengthy response. Another warning sign I failed to properly interpret. The following week, Amber insisted on joining me for a meeting with my florist, arriving with a portfolio of ideas, suspiciously similar to my own carefully curated selections. She dominated the conversation, suggesting alternatives to my choices and repeatedly using phrases like, "We were thinking," when discussing my wedding. During a coffee break, Amber accidentally spilled her latte across my wedding planner book, ruining months of notes and swatches. Her apologies seemed performative, especially when she immediately offered to take over some planning aspects to reduce my stress. Returning home early from work one day, I found Amber in my apartment, supposedly dropping off a wedding magazine she thought I'd enjoy. Flipping through it later, I discovered pages marked with post-its noting exact replicas of my wedding concept. Same color scheme, similar dress style, even cake designs matching mine. In the margins were calculations and notes about vendor contacts. Disturbed, I called my best friend Tara to share my concerns. "I think Amber is copying my entire wedding plan," I explained. "It's like she's creating a blueprint of everything I've chosen. You know how she's always been with your stuff," Tara reminded me gently. "Remember when she wore your prom dress to her own prom after you'd specifically bought different ones? Or when she applied to your dream college right after you were accepted? This seems like classic Amber, just on a bigger scale. But why would she duplicate a wedding when she's only been dating Michael for weeks? It makes no sense. Unless," Tara hesitated, "unless she's planning something more immediate. Watch your back, Liv. Something doesn't feel right here." 2 days later, Ryan returned from a business dinner looking troubled. He claimed it was work stress, but changed the subject when I pressed for details. That night, I woke to find him having a hushed phone conversation in our bathroom. "It's not time yet," I heard him whisper. "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." When questioned, he claimed it was an international client calling from a different time zone. His explanation was reasonable, but doubt had begun to take root in my mind. Both my sister and my fiancé were behaving strangely, and some invisible thread seemed to connect their behavior in ways I couldn't yet understand. The text from my mother arrived on a Tuesday morning. "Family emergency. Dinner tonight. 7 p.m. Everyone must attend." No explanation, no details, just the imperious summons I'd grown accustomed to throughout my life. "Should we bring anything?" I texted back, imagining various scenarios from health scares to financial troubles. "Just yourselves. And open minds," came her cryptic reply. I spent the day distracted at work, running through possibilities. When I shared the message with Ryan, he seemed unsurprised, almost as if he'd been expecting something like this. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together," he said, squeezing my hand with reassuring pressure that didn't quite reach his eyes. We arrived at my parents' home to find Amber's car already in the driveway, along with an unfamiliar luxury sedan I assumed belonged to Michael. The atmosphere inside was tense, but with an undercurrent of anticipation that confused me. My father poured drinks without meeting my eyes, while my mother fussed unnecessarily with appetizers arranged too perfectly. to be impromptu. What's going on? I finally asked after 20 minutes of stilted small talk. Mom said there was an emergency. My father cleared his throat, glancing at my mother before addressing me. Olivia, we need to discuss something important. Something that affects the whole family. Are you sick? Is someone sick? Panic fluttered in my chest. No, nothing like that, my mother interjected quickly. It's about finances and timing. What followed was a carefully orchestrated revelation that must have been rehearsed before our arrival. My father explained that their investments had experienced unexpected complications, significantly reducing their ability to contribute to my wedding as promised. We still want to help, my mother added, her expression combining guilt and determination in equal measure. Just not in the way we originally planned. Before I could process this information, Amber reached for Michael's hand, her expression radiating triumph barely disguised as happiness. Michael and I are engaged, she announced, flashing a diamond ring that looked surprisingly similar to my own. It was so unexpected and romantic. After 3 weeks of dating, I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. When it's right, No, Michael replied smoothly, his arm sliding around Amber's waist. We don't want to wait. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity as my mother continued. That's why we wanted to talk about timing and resources. Given our financial situation and the fact that both our daughters are planning weddings, what Mom is trying to say, Amber interrupted, is that it makes sense to prioritize. Since Michael and I want to get married quickly, and you and Ryan have your careers established already, we thought you might consider postponing. Postponing our wedding? The one that's completely planned and paid for? I looked between my family members, waiting for someone to admit this was an elaborate, cruel joke. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. We've discussed it as a family, and we think it makes sense for Amber and Michael to take your date and venue. All the arrangements are perfect, and this way we can still help finance one wedding properly. You've discussed it as a family? I repeated slowly. But Ryan and I weren't included in this family discussion about our wedding? We knew you'd be upset initially, my mother said, reaching for my hand, which I pulled away. But you've always been the reasonable one, Olivia, the practical one. The one who gives up what she wants, I finished for her. Amber's expression hardened. This is important to me. Michael and I need to get married quickly for his visa situation. It was the first I'd heard of any visa issues, and the explanation felt hollow. We don't have time to plan a whole new wedding, and yours is already perfect. So perfect you want to steal it? My voice cracked with emotion. Not steal, my father interceded. Share. We've already spoken with the venue about transferring the reservation. This revelation sent ice through my veins. You've already contacted my venue without talking to me first? We knew you'd be difficult about it, Amber sighed, as if my reaction was an inconvenient tantrum rather than justified outrage. That's why we took care of the logistics first. I turned to Ryan, expecting shared indignation, but found him watching the scene with calculated interest. What do you think about all this? I asked him. It's unexpected, he said carefully. But family matters are complicated. Perhaps we should consider what's being proposed. His lukewarm response felt like another betrayal. I stood, trembling with anger and hurt. This is unbelievable. You're actually trying to take my wedding day, my venue, everything I've planned for months. Amber rolled her eyes dramatically. You can cry later. This day belongs to me now. Casual cruelty of her words struck me like a physical blow. I looked at each family member, searching for any sign of shame or reconsideration, but found only determination and the expectation of my eventual compliance. You've always done this, I whispered. Always taken what's mine and expected me to accept it graciously. But this is different. This is my wedding, my future with Ryan. A wedding can happen any time, my mother insisted. Your sister needs this now. And what I need doesn't matter? What about what Ryan and I have planned and paid for? My father shifted uncomfortably. We'll reimburse your deposits eventually, once our financial situation improves. Eventually, I repeated, the word hollow with the weight of past promises similarly broken. Ryan stood, placing a steadying hand on my back. I think Olivia and I need time to discuss this privately. It's a significant request you're making. There's nothing to discuss, I insisted, pulling away from his touch. They've already decided. They've already started transferring arrangements behind our backs. Let's not make rash decisions, Ryan cautioned, his tone businesslike. Everyone's emotions are high right now. I stared at him, this man I'd agreed to marry, wondering why he wasn't more outraged on our behalf. Something in his composed demeanor felt wrong, disconnected from the betrayal unfolding around us. I need to leave, I announced, grabbing my coat. I can't be here right now. Olivia, don't be dramatic, Amber called after me. This is happening whether you approve or not. The deposit's already in our names. I stopped at the door, turning, to face my family one last time. You know what's ironic? I've spent my entire life accepting less so Amber could have more. I've stepped aside, stayed quiet, been the reasonable one. But this time, I won't bend. This time, you've gone too far. As I walked to my car alone, Ryan having chosen to stay, behind to smooth things over, I felt something permanent breaking within our family structure. What I couldn't know then was that this painful fracture would eventually expose truths that would change all our lives irrevocably. The week following that devastating family dinner became a blur of betrayal that seemed to intensify hourly. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my mother, each one more manipulative than the last. Amber has already ordered invitations. Using your color scheme, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Your father and I raised you to be selfless. Why are you hurting your sister this way? Everyone agrees this makes the most sense financially. Why can't you see that? I stopped responding after the third day, unable to stomach their collective gaslighting. Ryan's behavior remained puzzling. Rather than offering support, he suggested we take the high road and find another venue for later in the year. Your family relationships are important, he insisted while I sobbed on our couch. Sometimes compromise is necessary to maintain those bonds. Compromise? They stole our wedding, and the venue already confirmed they transferred our deposit to Amber's name without my permission. Ryan's expression flickered briefly before settling back into practiced concern. They must have listed you both on the original contract. Unfortunate, but legally there may not be much recourse. His legal assessment felt cold, detached from the emotional devastation I was experiencing. When I suggested fighting the venue transfer, he discouraged it as creating unnecessary conflict. The situation escalated when I received a congratulatory email from our photographer, thanking me for updating the bride's name and confirming they were excited to work with Amber and Michael on what was supposed to be my wedding day. Similar messages followed from the florist, caterer, and band, all of whom had been contacted by my parents or sister. They had systematically colonized every aspect of my carefully planned celebration. Confiding in Tara brought momentary relief. This is beyond sibling rivalry, she fumed. This is pathological behavior, and your parents are enabling it. They've always favored her, but this is different, I agreed. It feels calculated, almost like they planned this ambush together. And Ryan's reaction is strange too, Tara observed cautiously. Most partners would be outraged on your behalf. Before I could defend him, a notification chimed on my phone. Amber had posted on Instagram, "Sometimes dreams come true in unexpected ways. So excited to share our perfect day at Lakeside Gardens on June 15th. Bride to be bliss. Dream venue." The photo showed her in a bridal boutique, surrounded by dress options, identical to styles I had bookmarked. The caption included details matching my wedding concept boards, down to the signature cocktails and first dance song. The calculated precision of her theft was stunning. Comments from mutual friends expressed confusion. Several tagged me, asking if we were having a double wedding. Others who knew of our strained relationship sent private messages of concern. The public nature of Amber's announcement made the betrayal even more humiliating. That evening, I discovered Ryan had deleted several password-protected files from our shared cloud storage, including financial documents related to wedding expenses. When confronted, he claimed it was to reduce stress and move forward positively. His explanation felt hollow, adding to my growing unease about his true motives. 2 days later, while shopping for stress relief, I encountered Amber at the same bridal salon where I'd ordered my dress. She was modeling a gown suspiciously similar to mine, surrounded by fawning attendants and our beaming mother. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, interrupting their champagne toast. Amber barely flinched at my presence. "Finalizing my wedding dress, obviously. You weren't responding to Mom's texts about returning your deposit, so I chose something similar." "Similar? That's practically identical to my dress. Are you actually trying to become me?" Our mother intervened, ushering me toward the exit. "Olivia, please. You're making a scene. Amber chose this design independently. It's not her fault you both have similar taste." "Similar taste?" I laughed bitterly. "She has studied and copied every single detail of my wedding. This isn't coincidence. It's obsession." Amber approached, her expression cold despite her bridal finery. "You always think everything is about you. Has it occurred to you that maybe I deserve this more? That maybe I've always deserved the best things more than you?" "What are you talking about? What could possibly justify stealing my wedding?" "I've always been their favorite," she stated with chilling certainty. "I'm just claiming what should naturally come to me first. You had your chance to shine. Now it's my turn. Maybe your precious Ryan understands that better than you do." Her cryptic reference to Ryan triggered alarm bells. "What do you mean by that?" Amber simply smiled, turning back to the mirrors. "Nothing. Just that sometimes people recognize where the real value in a family lies." That night, I returned home earlier than expected from dinner with Tara to find our apartment empty. Ryan had texted that he'd be working late, but his laptop remained on the kitchen counter. When his phone buzzed with a message, I glimpsed a text from an unsaved number. "Meeting confirmed. MP bringing documents. 10 p.m. Riverdale Hotel. MP, Michael Patterson?" The coincidence seemed too significant to ignore. Acting on impulse and rising suspicion, I drove to the Riverdale Hotel, a discreet business establishment on the city's edge. In the dimly lit bar, I spotted Ryan and Michael in deep conversation, heads bent over documents spread between them. Their body language suggested conspiracy rather than new acquaintance. I remained hidden, watching as they exchanged papers and Ryan passed what appeared to be a USB drive. Their interaction had none of the awkwardness of in-laws meeting through difficult circumstances. They moved with the synchronicity of long-established collaborators. The final breaking point came the following morning when an ivory envelope arrived by courier. Inside was an elegant invitation to the wedding of Amber Matthews and Michael Patterson at Lakeside Gardens on June 15th. The design was an exact replica of invitations I had custom created with an independent designer, down to the personalized monogram I'd spent weeks perfecting. The only difference was the substitution of Amber's initials for mine. Accompanying the invitation was a handwritten note from Amber. "Hope you can attend as a regular guest. We've decided not to include you in the wedding party after your recent emotional outbursts. Maybe seek professional help before the big day." The calculated cruelty crystallized everything I'd been feeling into cold, clear resolve. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. Something deeper and more sinister was occurring. The coincidental connection between Ryan and Michael, their secret meeting, the methodical takeover of my wedding, and my family's uncharacteristically unified front all pointed to a larger scheme I couldn't yet fully comprehend. I placed the invitation on my kitchen table and made a decision. It was time to discover what Ryan was hiding, what connection he had to Michael, and why my sister seemed so confident in claiming not just my wedding but seemingly my entire life. The mysterious hotel meeting between Ryan and Michael haunted me. Their comfortable familiarity contradicted Ryan's claim that they'd only met through our families. Something didn't add up, and my professional instincts told me I was missing crucial pieces of a larger puzzle. My first real clue came accidentally. While searching for tax documents in Ryan's home office, I discovered a passport in the back of his desk drawer. It showed his familiar face but bore the name Richard Collins, not Ryan. The birth date was different too, making him 4 years older than he'd claimed. When questioned that evening, Ryan dismissed it smoothly. "That's my official passport. Ryan is my preferred name professionally. Many executives use variations for security reasons." His explanation seemed plausible on the surface, but his eyes darted away too quickly, a tell I'd noticed when he was concealing something. That night, I waited until Ryan's breathing deepened with sleep before carefully examining his phone. His password, my birth date, unlocked a device remarkably devoid of personal history. No photos older than our relationship, minimal contacts, and an email app missing any messages beyond 6 months ago. It was as if Ryan Collins had materialized fully formed the day we met. "I need help," I admitted to Tara over coffee the next morning. "Something's wrong with this whole situation." "What kind of help?" she asked, noting my exhausted appearance. "Professional help. Do you still have contact with that private investigator your law firm uses?" Tara's expression grew serious. "You think Ryan is involved in something illegal?" "I don't know what to think anymore, but I need facts, not more confusion." By that afternoon, I had hired Samuel Reeves, a former FBI agent turned private investigator specializing in financial fraud. His retainer depleted my personal savings, but something told me this investment would prove invaluable. "Start with these," I instructed, providing Ryan's claimed information and the passport details, "and look into connections with Michael Patterson. I need to know if they knew each other before my sister allegedly met him." While awaiting the investigator's findings, I conducted my own research online. Ryan's company website listed impressive credentials and client testimonials, but deeper digging revealed these references couldn't be independently verified. His LinkedIn profile showed employment gaps explained as consulting periods, and his claimed Harvard MBA program had no alumni record matching his details. 3 days later, Reeves called with preliminary findings. "Your fiancé is not who he claims to be," he stated without preamble. "Ryan Collins is an identity created approximately 3 years ago. His real name is Richard Cowan, former CFO of Meridian Investments, who resigned suddenly amid an SEC investigation into fraudulent accounting practices." My stomach dropped. Fraudulent practices? He was never formally charged, but several investors lost millions. The case was settled privately, with Cowan agreeing to leave the financial sector permanently. "But he's running a financial consulting firm now," I pointed out. "Exactly. Under a new name, with carefully constructed credentials. It's sophisticated identity manipulation, just legal enough to avoid obvious fraud charges. And Michael Patterson? Any connection?" "That's where it gets interesting," Reeves continued. "Patterson is actually Martin Petrovich, former legal counsel at Meridian who helped structure the settlements that kept Cowan out of prison. They've worked together for years." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Ryan, or rather Richard, had been lying about his identity from the moment we met. Our entire relationship was built on carefully constructed falsehoods. But what was his ultimate goal? What could he want from me and my family? "There's more," Reeves added grimly. "They've established several shell companies together over the past 2 years. The pattern suggests they're preparing for a significant financial move, possibly another investment scheme. Do you think my family is their target? We're not wealthy. Not directly wealthy, perhaps, but your father sits on the board of Westlake Credit Union, correct? That position comes with significant influence over lending decisions and access to high-value client information. The pieces began forming a horrifying picture. Ryan had targeted me specifically for my family connections, particularly my father's position. Michael's sudden interest in Amber created additional access and legitimacy within our family structure. The wedding venue transfer and their manipulation of my parents weren't about Amber's selfishness. They were calculated steps in a much larger scheme. I requested an emergency meeting with Reeves the following day, where he presented documentation connecting both men to previous financial improprieties and evidence of their ongoing partnership. Email records showed they had planned their approach to my family months before I even met Ryan. "What's their endgame?" I asked, staring at the damning evidence. Based on recent transactions and company formations, they appear to be establishing investment opportunities they'll likely present to your father's banking connections. Given their history, these will probably be sophisticated Ponzi schemes designed to extract maximum capital before collapsing. The confirmation of my worst fears left me numb. "How do I stop them?" "That depends," Reeves said carefully. "Are you willing to confront your fiancé directly, or would you prefer to gather more evidence before involving authorities?" That night, I made the hardest decision of my life. Rather than immediately exposing Ryan, I would play along temporarily to gather conclusive evidence of his plans. This approach would require careful performance, pretending I remained ignorant, while secretly documenting everything. When Ryan returned home, I greeted him with practiced normalcy, suppressing my knowledge of his betrayal behind a mask of routine domesticity. His kiss on my cheek felt like acid, his casual questions about my day part of an elaborate charade we were both now performing for different reasons. "I've been thinking about the wedding situation," I told him over dinner. "Maybe you're right about finding another date. Family harmony might be worth the sacrifice." Relief flickered across his features. "That's mature of you, Olivia. I've always admired your rationality. Will you help me explain my decision to Mom and Dad this weekend? Maybe we could join Amber and Michael for dinner, make peace with the situation?" "Absolutely," he agreed too quickly. "I'm sure we can all move forward positively." Over the next week, I gathered evidence methodically while maintaining my performance of acceptance. I installed recording software on our home computer, documented suspicious phone calls, and photographed documents Ryan carelessly left visible. Each discovery confirmed my worst fears while breaking my heart anew. The final confirmation came when I accidentally opened an email intended for Ryan that contained detailed plans for approaching my father's banking clients with investment opportunities in non-existent development projects. The projected fraud exceeded $20 million, with Ryan and Michael set to disappear once payments cleared their offshore accounts. With sufficient evidence compiled, I finally confronted Ryan in our living room, laying out copies of the most damning documents on our coffee table. "Richard Cowan," I said simply, watching his expression shift from confusion to calculation. "Or do you prefer Ryan Collins when you're running investment scams?" He recovered quickly, his charm activating like a defensive system. "Olivia, whatever you think you've found has an explanation. Yes, I changed my name after some unfortunate business complications, but that doesn't change who I am or how I feel about you. And how do you feel about me? The daughter of a banking executive whose connections you've been planning to exploit since before we met." His posture stiffened. "Our relationship is separate from business. I genuinely care for you." "Like Michael genuinely cares for Amber? That's why you two orchestrated this entire scenario, right? Two couples, double the access to my father's professional network?" Ryan's mask slipped momentarily, revealing cold assessment rather than emotional hurt. "Your sister was always the easier target. So desperate for attention, so eager to compete with you. One conversation about your wedding plans, and she was practically begging to take your place. So you used her jealousy, her need to outshine me? We simply recognized existing family dynamics and utilized them efficiently." His clinical description of their manipulation chilled me. Your parents were surprisingly eager to shift their support once Michael suggested his family's fictional investment opportunities. Were you ever planning to actually marry me? I asked, the last question that still mattered on a personal level. Ryan's hesitation before answering told me everything. Marriage would have provided certain legal protections for our financial arrangements, he finally admitted. But I did enjoy our time together, Olivia. You weren't just a means to an end. The calculated cruelty of his response crystallized my resolve. Get out, I whispered. Get your things and leave before I call the authorities with this evidence. You won't do that, he countered confidently. Exposing me means humiliating your family publicly. Your parents would lose standing in the community. Your sister's heart would break. You've spent your entire life protecting them, even at your own expense. You won't stop now. His certainty, his assumption that my lifelong pattern of sacrifice would continue even in the face of this betrayal, sparked something new within me. For the first time, I saw clearly how my family's dynamic had made me vulnerable to manipulation. How my acceptance of always coming second had attracted a predator specifically looking for someone accustomed to putting others first. You're wrong, I replied, my voice steady. This time, the truth matters more than anyone's comfort, including mine. As Ryan gathered his essential belongings, warning me that this won't end well for anyone, I faced an impossible decision: how to protect my family from imminent financial fraud while revealing the painful truth that would shatter their trust in Amber's relationship and expose our parents' favoritism as the vulnerability it had always been. With Ryan's deception confirmed, I needed to warn my family before irreparable damage occurred. My first impulse was to call my parents immediately, but experience suggested they might dismiss my concerns as jealousy or overreaction. This situation required irrefutable evidence presented strategically. I spent 2 days compiling a comprehensive file documenting Ryan and Michael's true identities, their fraudulent business history, and their current scheme targeting my father's banking connections. The dossier included official records, financial documents, and communications between the men discussing their plans for my family. My first attempt at intervention went exactly as feared. I called my parents, requesting an urgent meeting about concerns regarding Ryan and Michael's backgrounds. My mother immediately bristled. Olivia, we understand you're upset about the wedding, but trying to sabotage your sister's relationship is beneath you, she scolded. Michael comes from an excellent family with significant business interests. Your father has already discussed potential investment opportunities with him. That's exactly what I'm worried about, I insisted. I have documentation suggesting these investment opportunities may not be legitimate. Based on what? Your personal investigation because you're jealous? Your father has been in banking for 30 years. I think he can recognize a sound investment. When I attempted to explain the evidence, my father took the phone. Enough, Olivia. Your behavior is becoming concerning. Perhaps you should speak with someone professionally about these conspiracy theories. Their dismissal, while frustrating, wasn't surprising. Their judgment had already been compromised by Michael's careful manipulation and their own predisposition to favor Amber's interests. I would need a different approach. Next, I attempted to reach Amber directly, hoping that beneath her competitive nature existed some sisterly bond that would make her receptive to the truth. I invited her for coffee, framing it as a reconciliation attempt. I'm glad you finally accepted the situation, she said smugly as she sat across from me at the cafe. Michael said you'd eventually come around. Actually, I wanted to share some concerning information I've discovered about Ryan and Michael, I replied, sliding a condensed version of my file across the table. They aren't who they claim to be. Amber barely glanced at the documents. Let me guess. They're secretly criminals targeting our family? How convenient for your narrative. Just look at the evidence, Amber. Their real names, their history of financial fraud, the pattern of targeting families with banking connections. She pushed the file back toward me. This is pathetic, even for you. Creating fake documents because you can't stand that I'm marrying a successful man while yours turned out to be so understanding of family priorities? Michael warned me you might try something like this. He warned you because he knew I might discover the truth, I insisted. Think about it. How did you meet him? Right after my engagement, at a coffee shop you never frequented before. He knew all your interests, because they matched what Ryan had learned about me. We have natural chemistry and shared interests, Amber snapped, standing to leave. Not everything is about you, Olivia. Some men just prefer women with actual personality instead of your constant people-pleasing. As she stormed out, I realized direct approaches wouldn't work. My family was too deeply entrenched in their perspectives and too thoroughly manipulated by the men to accept the truth without incontrovertible proof and public exposure. The solution came to me while reviewing the investigators' reports. Ryan and Michael were planning to present their fraudulent investment opportunity at Amber's rehearsal dinner, where my father had arranged for several bank colleagues to attend. This event would be their moment to secure commitments before disappearing with investor funds after the wedding. I needed to expose them publicly, in a setting where they couldn't control the narrative or dismiss the evidence. But timing would be crucial. Acting too soon might allow them to regroup, while waiting too long risked legitimate investments being made. Working with Reeves, I compiled a presentation detailing their scheme, focusing on factual evidence rather than personal betrayal. I also contacted Special Agent Lisa Harrington at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, sharing evidence of the pending fraud. While insufficient for immediate arrests, the information placed Ryan and Michael on their radar. We can monitor the situation, Agent Harrington confirmed. But we need clear evidence of intent to defraud, preferably recorded solicitation of funds under false pretenses. They're planning to pitch investors at my sister's rehearsal dinner next Friday, I explained. I can wear a recording device. That would help build our case, she agreed. But understand, confronting them publicly comes with risks. These men have built their careers on manipulation. They won't surrender easily. I spent the intervening days in careful preparation, rehearsing what I would say and anticipating their counter-arguments. I also made peace with the likelihood that my relationship with my family might never recover from this revelation. By exposing Ryan and Michael, I would also be exposing my parents' willingness to sacrifice my happiness and my sister's calculated betrayal. The rehearsal dinner was held at Lakeside Gardens, the very venue that should have hosted my wedding. Entering that space, seeing the decor that mirrored my original plans, brought a sharp pain I pushed aside to focus on the task at hand. I wore a recording device provided by the FBI, concealed in a brooch Agent Harrington assured me was undetectable. My parents greeted me with surprise and visible discomfort. We weren't sure you'd come, my mother admitted, given the circumstances. I wouldn't miss my sister's rehearsal dinner, I replied simply. Amber kept her distance, clearly having warned others about my unstable behavior. Ryan and Michael worked the room confidently, focusing particular attention on my father's banking colleagues. I observed as they distributed elegant folders containing investment prospectuses for Patterson Collins Development, their fictitious venture. I waited until after dinner, when Michael stood to make a toast and transition into his investment presentation. As he welcomed guests and thanked my parents for their support, I moved quietly to connect my laptop to the room's projector system, previously arranged with the venue's technical staff. Before my future brother-in-law continues, I have something important to share with everyone, I announced, interrupting Michael mid-sentence. Something that affects everyone in this room, particularly those considering investment opportunities. Olivia, this is inappropriate, my father warned, half rising from his seat. What I'm about to show you is factual information about Richard Cowan and Martin Petrovich, whom you know as Ryan Collins and Michael Patterson, I continued, activating the presentation. Both men have histories of financial fraud and are currently operating under false identities. The room erupted in confused murmurs as documents appeared on screen. SEC investigation records, news articles about Meridian Investments' collapse, and photographs of both men under their real names. "This is absurd," Michael protested, looking to Ryan for support. "Some kind of jealous vendetta." Ryan approached me, voice low and threatening. "Stop this now. You're making a serious mistake." "The mistake was thinking I would protect your scheme to preserve family peace," I replied loudly enough for others to hear. The presentation continued with timeline evidence showing their coordinated approach to our family, followed by details of their current investment fraud. Banking professionals in the audience began examining the investment materials with new scrutiny, whispering among themselves. Amber stared at the screen in growing horror, particularly as emails between Ryan and Michael appeared, discussing her as an ideal secondary target and leverage point for accessing senior banking relationships. "Michael, tell me this isn't true," she pleaded, her voice small and uncertain. Before he could respond, Agent Harrington and 2 colleagues entered the room, having monitored the situation from outside. "Richard Cowan and Martin Petrovich, we'd like to speak with you regarding allegations of wire fraud and securities violations." What followed was chaos. Ryan attempted to leave through a side exit but was intercepted by FBI agents. Michael launched into a convoluted explanation about misunderstandings and legitimate business restructuring. My father's banking colleagues quickly distanced themselves, several thanking me quietly for the warning. Amid the commotion, I found myself face to face with Amber, tears streaming down her face. "You knew," she accused. "You knew and tried to tell me." "I tried," I confirmed without satisfaction. "They targeted both of us, Amber, used our family dynamics against us. But how could I have been so wrong about him? About everything?" She collapsed into a chair, the elaborate engagement ring catching the light as she covered her face. My parents stood shell-shocked as their carefully orchestrated evening disintegrated around them. The perfect wedding they had prioritized over mine was revealed as part of an elaborate con, their judgment exposed as fatally flawed before their social and professional circles. As Ryan was escorted past me, he paused momentarily. "You could have walked away," he said quietly. "Saved yourself the collateral damage." "Unlike you," I replied. "I don't abandon people even when they've hurt me." In the aftermath, as guests departed and FBI agents collected statements, I felt no triumph or vindication. There was only hollow exhaustion and the recognition that while the external threat had been neutralized, the internal fractures in my family might never fully heal. The wedding was canceled amid scandal and embarrassment. My sister retreated to a friend's vacation home to escape scrutiny. My parents faced difficult questions from friends and colleagues about their judgment and priorities, and I was left to rebuild a life whose foundation had been thoroughly shaken, uncertain what relationship, if any, I still had with my family. In the weeks following the rehearsal dinner revelation, silence descended between me and my family. The FBI investigation into Ryan and Michael expanded, revealing additional victims and fraudulent operations across 3 states. Both men eventually accepted plea deals, with Ryan facing 5 years in federal prison and Michael 3, along with significant financial penalties neither could pay. The immediate aftermath left me feeling hollow rather than victorious. The apartment Ryan and I had shared felt contaminated by lies. Everyday objects triggered memories now tainted with doubt. Had any moment been genuine? Had any feelings been real? I threw myself into work, accepting a challenging new campaign that required long hours and intense focus. Colleagues noted my changed demeanor, the caution that had replaced my former openness. Tara worried I was hiding rather than healing, but respected my need for professional distraction. "You're processing trauma," she reminded me over lunch, 3 months after everything collapsed. "Not just relationship betrayal, but family betrayal too. That doesn't heal overnight." "Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice," I admitted. Exposing everything publicly hurt so many people beyond just Ryan and Michael. They were going to defraud innocent people, Olivia. Your father's colleagues, their investors. You prevented that. At the cost of my family relationships. Relationships built on unhealthy patterns that made you vulnerable to someone like Ryan in the first place. Tara pointed out gently. Maybe this breaking point was necessary. Her perspective helped, but true healing began when I received an unexpected job offer from Meridian Creative, a prestigious agency in Boston. Relocating meant leaving the physical spaces associated with my trauma, creating geographical and emotional distance from painful memories. Boston's unfamiliarity proved therapeutic. Without history shadowing every street corner, I could breathe again. My apartment overlooking the Charles River became a sanctuary of self-discovery, decorated with objects chosen solely for my pleasure rather than compromised to accommodate another's preferences. 6 months into my new life, I received my first communication from Amber, a handwritten letter without return address. I don't expect forgiveness, she wrote, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Not just for the wedding, but for a lifetime of taking without considering what I was taking from. Therapy is helping me understand the competition that defined our relationship wasn't your creation, but my response to feelings of inadequacy. Never addressed. You were always the capable one, the independent one. I wanted what you had without understanding the work you put into creating your life. The letter continued with painful self-reflection and acknowledgement of her role in enabling Ryan and Michael's scheme. She closed with, I don't expect a relationship, but I needed you to know that I recognize the truth now, however late this realization comes. I didn't respond immediately, needing time to process her words. But the letter marked a turning point. In my healing journey, transforming abstract hurt into concrete acknowledgement I could examine and eventually release. My parents' attempt at reconciliation came 3 months later through my father's awkward phone call. Your mother and I have been doing some reflection, he began hesitantly. We've realized our pattern of prioritizing certain things wasn't always fair to you. It wasn't about fairness, Dad, I replied, surprising myself with the clarity I felt. It was about seeing me, really seeing me, instead of seeing me in relation to Amber. His silence acknowledged the truth of my statement. We'd like to visit if you're open to that. No expectations, just beginning a conversation. Their visit was strained but significant. We avoided addressing the wedding directly, focusing instead on establishing new communication patterns. My mother brought photo albums I'd never seen, sharing stories from my childhood with a perspective that seemed genuinely interested in my experience rather than comparing it to Amber's. We made mistakes, she admitted as they prepared to leave. Patterns we didn't recognize until everything fell apart. I'm sorry it took such dramatic circumstances to see what we were doing. I'm still working through it, I told them honestly. I'm not ready for family holidays or pretending everything's fine, but I'm open to building something new. Something healthier, if you are. Professional success in Boston brought unexpected personal connection when I collaborated with photographer Daniel Westfield on a major campaign. His genuine interest developed slowly, allowing trust to build gradually. Unlike Ryan's whirlwind intensity, Daniel's calm consistency gave me space to test my instincts about character and intention. I have trust issues, I warned him on our third date. Recent experience with elaborate deception. Trust is earned, not assumed, he replied. I'm patient. His patience proved genuine. Over months of dating, Daniel demonstrated integrity through actions rather than declarations. When I finally shared my full story, his response focused on my strength rather than my victimization. You protected people who hadn't protected you, he observed. That says everything about your character. A year into our relationship, after meeting my parents during their second visit and navigating that complexity with respectful boundaries, Daniel proposed with characteristic thoughtfulness. The ring was nothing like Ryan's ostentatious diamond, but a unique sapphire that reminded him of my resilience. No pressure or timeline, he assured me. We build this together, at a pace that feels right for both of us. We married 18 months later in a small ceremony at a historic Boston library. My parents attended, their presence significant but not central to our celebration. Amber did not attend, but sent a sincere note of congratulations and a donation to a fraud victims advocacy organization in our honor, a gesture that acknowledged our history while respecting our present boundaries. The wedding was entirely our own creation, without reference to past plans or others' expectations. Standing beside Daniel, exchanging vows we had written together, I realized how profoundly different authentic partnership felt from the performance of connection Ryan had orchestrated. 3 years after the catastrophic family dinner that had upended my life, I find myself in a place of unexpected peace. My relationship with my family remains a work in progress, defined now by careful honesty rather than assumed obligation. Amber and I exchange occasional emails, building a tentative connection based on adult recognition rather than childhood patterns. The most important lesson emerged slowly through therapy and reflection. Intuition speaks truth when we listen. I had sensed things were wrong with Ryan, with my family's behavior, with the entire situation. But years of conditioning had taught me to doubt my perceptions when they conflicted with others' narratives. Learning to trust my internal warning system became my most valuable growth. Today, when I look at the life I've built from the ashes of betrayal, I feel neither bitterness nor regret, but profound appreciation for the authentic connections now forming the foundation of my experience. The pain that once seemed unbearable became the catalyst for liberation from patterns that had limited me since childhood. True freedom, I've discovered, isn't found in escaping those who have hurt us, but in transcending the internal beliefs that kept us vulnerable to their manipulation. My sister stole my wedding with my parents' blessing, but in doing so, they inadvertently released me from the obligation to maintain unhealthy family dynamics. The truth about my fiancé destroyed her planned celebration, but it also destroyed the limitations I had accepted as normal for far too long. Have you ever had to rebuild trust after profound betrayal? I'd love to hear how you navigated that challenging journey. Leave a comment below sharing your experience or any questions this story raised for you. If my story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing with others who might find comfort in knowing they're not alone in family struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to authentic peace. May your own path, whatever its challenges, lead to the genuine connections we all deserve.